6 Americans. Gone. Not on a battlefield deep inside enemy territory, not in some classified special ops mission. They died in a trailer, a makeshift office, a command and control center surrounded by 6-foot concrete walls, at a commercial port in Kuwait. And the worst part? Nobody heard the warning sirens in time. This is the story of what happened at Shuaiba Port on the night of March 1st, 2026. The night America's darkest fears about this war became real. The night 6 American soldiers paid the ultimate price. And the questions being asked inside the Pentagon right now are ones that nobody in Washington wants to answer. Stay with me, because this story goes deep. Before we talk about politics, war strategy, or drone defense failures, let's talk about the people. The Pentagon has now officially identified 4 of the 6 Americans killed in this attack. Captain Cody A. Cork, 35 years old, from Winter Haven, Florida. A man who signed up to serve his country, working logistics in one of the most complex military operations in modern American history. Sergeant First Class Noah L. Teachins, 42 years old. From Bellevue, Nebraska, a seasoned non-commissioned officer, a man who had given years of his life to the Army Reserve. Sergeant First Class Nicole M. Amor, 39 years old. From White Bear Lake, Minnesota, one of the women serving on the front lines of this operation, not in combat, but in the critical supply chain work that keeps an entire military functioning. Sergeant Declan J. Cody, just 20 years old. From West Des Moines, Iowa, 20 years old. He had his whole life ahead of him. All 4 were members of the 103rd Sustainment Command, an Army Reserve unit based in Des Moines, Iowa. These were not frontline infantry troops. They were logisticians, supply chain specialists, the people who make sure that food, equipment, and vehicles reach American troops across the region. The names of the other 2 fallen soldiers have not yet been released. The military is waiting until all families have been personally notified. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth called them the absolute best of America. And in Washington, flags were lowered to half staff. These 6 men and women came from different states, different backgrounds, different stages of life, but they died together in the same building in the same instant when an Iranian drone found its target. Now let's talk about where this happened, because the location matters. Shuaiba Port in Kuwait. It sounds like a military base. It's not. Shuaiba is primarily a commercial harbor, a logistics hub through which the U.S. military ships tactical vehicles, weapons, and supplies into the broader Middle East region. It's a working port, the kind of place with shipping containers, cranes, warehouses, and now, a small tactical operations center. That operations center was essentially a large trailer, what the military calls a command and control center. It was surrounded by 6-foot concrete walls. Sometimes there are sandbags on the roof, sometimes on the sides. But here's what CBS News reported, citing multiple military sources. Some officials had questioned whether this makeshift operations center should have even been used at all. The infrastructure was described as inadequate for the threat level. One source told CBS News directly, "We basically had no drone defeat capability." Let that sink in. A U.S. military installation, at a time when America was already at war with Iran, had virtually no effective system in place to stop incoming drones. And then the drone came. Based on what U.S. military officials have told reporters, here is what we know about the attack itself. It was a one-way drone, what the military calls a loitering munition, the kind that flies until it finds its target and then becomes the weapon. Iran is known to use the Shahed 136, nicknamed the kamikaze drone. That's the type of weapon that most likely struck Shuaiba Port. The drone made it through. How? Defense Secretary Hegseth tried to explain it during a press conference at the Pentagon. He said, "You have air defenses, and a lot's coming in, and you hit most of it. Every once in a while, you might have one. Unfortunately, we call it a squirter that makes its way through." A squirter. That's the word the Pentagon used to describe the weapon that killed 6 Americans. 2 military sources told CBS News that they did not hear warning sirens before the strike. The sirens had been working all week. But in some previous incidents, drones had already entered the base perimeter before the siren would even sound. Counter-battery systems, the kind designed to detect incoming enemy fire, were apparently absent or inactive. There was reportedly no American counter-rocket, artillery and mortar, CRAM system at Shuaiba Port. The drone hit. Fire engulfed the buildings. Recovery of the bodies was difficult in the immediate aftermath because of how intense the fire was. At least 18 additional service members had been seriously wounded by Monday morning in the broader operation, not just from this attack, but across multiple incidents. This was not just a tragedy. Military sources are now calling it a systemic failure. So how did we get to a point where American soldiers are dying in Kuwait from Iranian drones in 2026? Let's back up. Operation Epic Fury. That's the name the U.S. military gave to this campaign. Began on February 28th, 2026. It was a coordinated joint military operation between the United States and Israel targeting Iran on multiple fronts simultaneously. According to the White House, the operation was designed to eliminate Iran's nuclear development capabilities, destroy Iran's ballistic missile arsenal, degrade Iran's proxy terror networks across the region, cripple Iran's naval forces. Israel gave its side of the operation the name Operation Roaring Lion. The opening strikes hit Tehran, Isfahan, Qom, Karaj, and Kermanshah, major Iranian cities and military centers. Among the most significant results of those early strikes, Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei was killed. The man who had led Iran's theocratic regime for decades, dead, along with multiple other senior Iranian officials and military commanders. Iran's response was immediate. Operation True Promise 4, that's what Iran called its counterstrike campaign, sent dozens of drones and ballistic missiles across the region, targeting Israel and U.S. military bases in Jordan, Kuwait, Bahrain, and beyond. As of now, American forces have struck more than 1,700 targets inside Iran. U.S. B-2 stealth bombers have hit hardened ballistic missile facilities. The USS Shahid Bagheri, an Iranian drone carrier, was struck and disabled. Multiple Iranian naval ships have been sunk, but Iran is still firing back, and American soldiers are dying. Now, here's something that hasn't gotten as much attention as it deserves, and it should. In the chaotic opening days of this conflict, Kuwait mistakenly shot down 3 U.S. fighter jets. 3 American aircraft downed by an ally. All 6 aircrew members ejected safely and are reportedly in stable condition. So that is one piece of good news in this story. But the incident is being described as a sign of just how chaotic the air war with Iran has become. Think about what that means. In the skies over Kuwait, American jets are flying. Iranian drones and missiles are flying. Kuwaiti air defenses are trying to shoot down the Iranian threats. And in the confusion, American aircraft were identified as targets. U.S. Central Command confirmed the incident. They called it a reflection of the complexity of operating in a multi-nation air defense environment during an active, fast-moving conflict. This is what happens when a war expands this quickly across this many countries. Inside the Pentagon right now, there are serious questions being asked, and the answers are not satisfying. How did a U.S. tactical operations center at a military logistics hub have inadequate drone defense? Why were requests for additional counter-drone capabilities reportedly denied or ignored? Why were American reserve soldiers, logisticians, not combat troops, stationed in a facility that defense officials now say should not have been used? One military source described the situation to CBS News plainly. They were nice people doing what their nation asked of them. That sentence should haunt every decision-maker in this chain of command. Secretary Hegseth has defended the operation overall, but has not provided clear answers on why the Shuaiba port installation was so vulnerable. General Dan Kane, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, told reporters bluntly, "We expect to take additional losses. The House and Senate are moving to vote on war powers resolutions that would require the president to obtain congressional authorization before continuing military operations. But those votes, even if they pass, are not expected to override a presidential veto." Secretary of State Marco Rubio told reporters on Capitol Hill that the U.S. had intelligence suggesting Iran would immediately strike American forces if Israel launched an attack on Iran, and that the Trump administration chose to go first preemptively to reduce U.S. casualties. "And we knew that there was going to be an Israeli action," Rubio said. "We knew that would precipitate an attack against American forces, and we knew that if we didn't preemptively go after them, we would suffer higher casualties." Whether that calculation was correct, whether American lives were saved or lost because of that decision, is now a question that historians and military analysts will debate for years. Iran is fighting back, hard. With Khamenei dead, Iran's top national security official Ali Larijani stepped forward and declared, "We will not negotiate with the United States." Iran's military has reportedly lost control over several units, which are now operating based on older general instructions rather than unified command. Iran's Red Crescent reported more than 550 civilians killed in the strikes on Iran so far. Hengal, a human rights monitoring group, estimated that 1,300 members of Iranian military forces had been killed. Iran has targeted not just U.S. bases, but broader regional allies. 11 people were killed in Israel from Iranian strikes. Deaths were reported in the UAE, Kuwait, and Bahrain. Hezbollah launched attacks against Israel in retaliation for Khamenei's killing. The IDF declared it an official declaration of war by Hezbollah and struck southern Lebanon, Beirut, and the Bekaa Valley. Even a British Royal Air Force station in Cyprus was hit by a drone strike. Greece announced it would deploy frigates and F-16s to defend Cyprus. This is not just a U.S.-Iran conflict anymore. This is a regional war that is spreading fast. President Trump has said the operation could last 4 to 5 weeks. He has also warned that if Iran escalates further, the U.S. response would be one that, in his words, has never been seen before. 6 Americans are dead. Captains Cody Cork, Sergeant First Class Noah Teachins, Sergeant First Class Nicole Amer, Sergeant Declan Cody, and 2 more soldiers whose names have not yet been released to the public, because there are still families who haven't yet had someone knock on their door and deliver the worst news of their lives. They were Army Reserve soldiers. They were logisticians. They were doing the unglamorous, essential work of keeping an army moving, shipping vehicles, keeping supplies flowing, keeping people fed and equipped. They were not special operators. They were not Navy SEALs. They were weekend warriors who answered their country's call. And they died in a trailer at a commercial port because the drone defenses weren't there, the warning sirens didn't sound in time, and somewhere in the chain of command, critical decisions were made that left them exposed. This is the Pentagon's darkest hour, not because of what America's military has done in this war, but because of what it failed to do for 6 of its own people in their final moments. The war in Iran will go on. More targets will be struck. More ships will sink. The political debates will rage in Congress and across cable news. But somewhere in West Des Moines, Iowa, a family is mourning a 20-year-old boy named Declan Cody who will never come home. That's the red line that was crossed. Not a military threshold, not a geopolitical boundary, a human one. If this story affected you, share it. Because these names deserve to be remembered, not just as statistics in a war update, but as people. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one.